students, welcome back to the class. I'm Dr. Ritu Khosla and today I will teach you about the topic India's foreign policy. In this lecture, we will study about the factors behind the framing of the foreign policy of India. Students, let us start our lecture with some basic questions like what is a policy? The Cambridge English Dictionary describes policy as a set of ideas or plan of what to do in a particular situation that has been agreed to officially by a group of people, a business organization, a government, or a political party. So, as we all are the students of political science, we often use the term public policy, which means a way through which governments transform their political vision into programs and actions. We can divide government's policy as national policy and foreign policy. National policy is one that deals with the policies and programs related to a state, like welfare and development related policies. Foreign policies are set of principles through which relations of a state are made vis-à-vis other states, and every state in this process tries to fulfill their own national interest. In India, since the establishment of the constitution, foreign policy has been given utmost significance. This is so because a strong and a rational policy protects the sovereignty of a state, it promotes economic development, maintains world peace, and tries to search solutions for international issues and problems through mutual cooperation. So that is why a foreign policy is very significant. It is important not only for the state, rather it is significant for the whole international scenario. Students, now let us discuss the various factors and determinants that influence the making of the foreign policy in India. The factors can be traced within the Indian state as well as outside the physical boundaries of the state. Students, remember one thing. No state can ignore the internal socio-economic, political and physical factors while framing its policies. Let's start with the factors now. The first factor is geographical factor that includes various sub-factors like size, location, map, climate, natural resources, and so on. We all know that India has a very large geographical size with so many neighboring countries. With some we share cordial relations and with some we do not do that. So while framing the foreign policy, efforts are made to develop good relations with them. In addition, India has so many natural and man-made borders due to which conflict arises with the neighboring states. That is why a strong armed force is required to safeguard the borders. Further, strong navy is required to protect our sea, coastline and oceans. How can one forget that terrorists who attacked Mumbai came through water? Girls, the second factor that we are going to discuss is economic factor. This is a very significant factor. When India it got independent, the economic condition of Indian state was not so good because of the drain away of wealth by the Britishers. There prevails the problem of unemployment, deficiency of food grains, and so on. Under such circumstances, India was dependent upon the foreign states for assistance, and thus it was reflected in our foreign policy as well. Further, with the adoption of new economic policies in 1991, the Indian economy got strongly linked with the world economy, and India started entering into various bilateral and multilateral agreements with the other countries. And also, it became a member of various regional economic or associations. The SARC is the example of that. Students, the next factor that we are going to do now is the ideological factors. Now, almost all the states they adhere to one or the other ideology, and on the basis of that, they frame their foreign policy as well as the national policy. But interestingly, Indian constitution is a mixed bag. It endorses liberalism, socialism, as well as Gandhian philosophy. Due to this reason, Indian state has been able to maintain its relation with the states endorsing different ideologies like liberalism in America, socialism in Russia, and so on. Moving further, the next factor is the national leaders. Students' policy formed by any state is a reflection of ideas and ideology of the leader behind that policy. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru is considered as the father of India's foreign policy, and his views and ideology was reflected in India's foreign policy like non-alignment. His socialist ideas tilted him towards Soviet Union. On similar ground, currently, India's foreign policy has the influence of PM Modi. For instance, he initiated Act East policy. Now, not only this, even the Constitution of India, it guides the foreign policy of Indian state, as mentioned in Part 4 of the Constitution under Article 51, which states that India shall endeavour to promote peace and security and establish relations with the other states on the basis of justice and respect. Also to respect international laws and treaties. So the we can say the guidelines related to the formation of India's foreign policy has been mentioned in the Indian Constitution as well. Students, as I told you earlier, that international situation greatly impacts the foreign policy of a state. Here I would like to mention that India opted for non-alignment because of the prevalence of Cold War at international level. India was reluctant to join any of the power blocs, neither USA nor USSR, as it had a fear to lose its newly gained independence. Also, it wanted to take help of both the superpowers to build its economy. Further, if you talk about the geographical location of the Indian state, that was not favorable to join any of the power bloc. For instance, if we talk about the China, that was the communist China, it is the neighboring state of India. And further, America had established its military base in Indian Ocean. So India had no other option. It was not in the situation to join any of the power bloc. Otherwise, it would have been a threat for the Indian state. Joining one power bloc means having enmity with the other one, and India was not in the position to go for that. So India it decided to remain non-aligned, and it maintained the cordial relations with both the superpowers. Now further, with the disintegration of Soviet Union in 1991 and with the end of the Cold War, only one superpower was left. So under the changing international scenario, India it came more closer to the Western powers. And if we talk about the current international situation, India itself has emerged as we can say a very strong power, and it is trying to maintain the relations with the other states. And in this process, it is not being influenced by any outside state. Now, for instance, we can't ignore the influencing role of India, which it plays among the SAARC nations. India has also been very vocal about the problems which are being faced by the Afro-Asian countries, as these countries have undergone the exploitation under the colonial rule. India itself had been a victim of the colonial power. So all these countries are making effort for their social, political and economic development on a common platform. Not only this, India has shown an abiding faith in United Nations, and it has been a very active member in its various organs and agencies. Not only this, it has been demanding the restructuring of the United Nations organization by making its governance more democratic as well as transparent. Now, students, that was all in this lecture on India's foreign policy concept. And in the next lecture, we will discuss about the various principles of India's foreign policy. Thank you. Have a great learning.